on treaty land that is steeped in rich Indigenous history and home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people today. As a city, we have a responsibility for the stewardship of the land on which we live and work. And today we acknowledge the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation of the Anishinaabe people on whose traditional territory we are meeting. So our agenda this evening, we will have a presentation on the overview of the official plan review. So for those of you who've been with us through the process, this might be a little bit of a recap. We'll share the Shaping Guelph background and then jump into the OPA 80 summary for Rolling Hills area, zoning and regulations, and then have, as I mentioned, a good amount of time for discussion. We do have till 8 o'clock together, so hopefully we'll be able to have the city team answer your questions as we go through the evening. We'll wrap up with next steps before we conclude. I'd like to just take a moment as I still see a few people joining us, so we'll do a quick round of introductions of the city team who are here and who you'll be hearing from this evening. And I'll just ask each of them to unmute and say hello. So Melissa, would you like to go first?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Melissa Aldonate. I'm the Manager of Policy Planning at the City of Guelph.
Thanks, Melissa. And Jason?
Good evening, everyone. Welcome this evening. My name is Jason Downham, and I'm a policy planner with the City of Guelph, assisting with Shaping Guelph.
Thanks, Jason. And Leah?
Hi, everyone. I'm Leah Leffler. I'm working with Jason and Melissa. I'm an environmental planner at the City of Guelph.
Great. And Kelly?
Hello, everyone. My name is Kelly Guthrie. I'm a community engagement coordinator with the City of Guelph.
And then from the Lura team, James?
Hi, everyone. James Knott with Lura Consulting.
And Cyan?
Hey, everyone.
Okay, great. I saw Kelly, you've got in the chat. Hopefully everybody can hear okay. And if you can confirm, we got one thumbs up reaction, so hopefully people can hear everything all right. And we'll be able to, as I said, hear some questions as we go through. And we'd like to start with the presentation, if that's all right with the group. You're welcome to put some things in the chat. We'll be able to kind of circle back to those if there's something as we go that that comes up for you. And then we'll have a good amount of time for discussion towards the end. I would ask that whatever's in the chat is respectful of diverse opinions and perspectives who are here. Similarly for when we have our raised hands and unmuted discussion. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Melissa to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Susan. So to begin with, I just want to provide an overview of the official plan and the work that we've done to date on our official plan review, which we also call Shaping Guelph. So an official plan is a legal planning document that is required by the Planning Act. It sets out the vision for the future of a municipality and provides policy direction to manage future land use patterns and growth. An official plan primarily deals with how land can be used, what services are needed, and when and in what order the city will grow. Land use planning in Ontario is governed by the province. The Ontario Planning Act provides a legislative framework and sets out the tools that the city can use for land use planning. The provincial policy statement provides the province's policies on land use planning. It gives direction on key land use planning issues that affect communities, and that includes managing growth, housing policies, using and managing natural resources, protecting the environment, and protecting public health and safety. And the final document I want to mention for you this evening is A Place to Grow, the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. It sets out the framework for growth to the year 2051, and it establishes population, employment forecasts, and targets that municipalities must conform with. And Guelph is a municipality within the Greater Golden Horseshoe. As such, we are required to prepare and update our official plan to conform and be consistent with provincial legislation, policies, and plans. And in particular, we have a legislated deadline for complying to A Place to Grow of July 1st of this year. So the purpose of our official plan review that we call Shaping Guelph is to bring our official plan into conformity with a place to grow, to update our policies to conform and be consistent with recent amendments to the Planning Act, to the Clean Water Act, and to the Provincial Policy Statement. OPA 80 includes revisions to implement the recommendations of a land use study that we completed for the York Road and Elizabeth Street area of the city. It also proposes amendments to improve clarity for implementation and to address city-approved plans, policies, procedures, or council decisions. We've also included housekeeping changes that are related to things such as changing of provincial ministry names, address updates, or to correct policy numbering references. So the process to review the official plan began back in October of 2019. Between then and April of 2021, background studies for the growth management strategy were prepared and community engagement was conducted. During this time, a special meeting of council was held to initiate the official plan review and set the scope for the review. In April of 2021, 3 different scenarios for growth were released. In May of 2021, the official plan review policy paper was released and discussions were held with the community advisory committees and Indigenous governments. The growth management strategy, which sets out conformity with a place to grow, was presented to council in January of this year. And in February, draft official plan amendment 80 was released. We held an open house and a public meeting of council in March. I'll now provide a brief background of Shaping Guelph, which is the city's growth management strategy. So the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe includes population forecasts and targets for Guelph. A population forecast was set for Guelph of 203,000 people and a forecast for employment of 116,000 jobs for Guelph for the year 2051. A place to grow also sets a minimum intensification target of 50% for Guelph, which means that we must plan for a minimum of half of our new dwelling units to be accommodated within the built-up area of the city. The built-up area is shown in a yellowy beige color on this map and consists of the areas of the city that were considered to be developed prior to the year 2006. The Rolling Hills area is within the built-up area of the city. We are also required to plan for a minimum density of 150 persons and jobs per hectare in the downtown by 2031, and a minimum density of 50 persons and jobs per hectare in the designated Greenfield area. The Greenfield area is shown in a gray color on this map and includes the Guelph Innovation District Secondary Plan area and the Claremont Secondary Plan area in the south of the city. On this slide is Schedule 1 of our current official plan, and it displays the current growth plan elements or urban structure for the city. The built-up area on this slide is shown in purple, and the Greenfield area is shown in beige. This slide also shows where our mixed-use nodes are in the north, south, east, and west areas of the city, along with our intensification corridors. This schedule was a starting point for conversations about where and how to grow in the initial stages of the Shaping Guelph project. In the spring of 2021, consultations were had with the community on the proposed urban structure for 2051. The proposed urban structure considered our existing nodes and corridors and made recommendations for strategic growth areas. Strategic growth areas are areas that may include infill, redevelopment, brownfield sites, the expansion or conversion of existing buildings or grayfields. They also include lands along major roads, arterials, or other areas with existing or planned frequent transit service. New strategic growth areas were proposed in the Claremont Secondary Plan area in the south of the city and the Guelph Innovation District area. At that time, a new strategic growth area was proposed along Clare Road East. On this schedule, you also see the employment areas of the city identified in blue, and that includes the Hanlon Creek Business Park, the Hanlon Business Park, the Watson Industrial Area, and the Northwest Industrial Area of the city. On this slide, you can see a closer view of what had been proposed in the south end of the city, and that was proposed in 2021 for community engagement. Through those growth scenario consultations, we also had land use options for various areas of the city, including rolling hills. On this slide, you'll see what we had proposed for consultation in Rolling Hills, which included the medium density residential designation along the Clare Road frontage. So you'll see that in dark yellow on this slide, with low density Greenfield residential shown in light yellow and low density residential shown in white. At the time of the growth scenario discussions, the natural heritage system was displayed as it exists in the official plan without any refinements. During our consultation, we had many comments on Shaping to Guelph, including comments from the Rolling Hills area residents. The comments were generally divided between those who oppose land use change and would like the Rolling Hills area maintained as is into the future, and those who were in favor of land use changes that could include intensification and diversity of uses and built form types in the area. Some also raised concerns about impacts on the surrounding natural heritage features. I'll now provide an overview of the proposed policies and land use designations that were released with OPA 80, with a specific focus on the Rolling Hills area. To begin with, I will provide a summary of the changes to Chapter 3, Creating Complete Communities. This chapter sets out the policies for growth management, and it is being revised for consistency with a place to grow, the provincial policy statement, and the city's growth management strategy. Updates include policies for the urban structure elements that include the built-up area, the Greenfield area, and the urban growth center, among others. It also provides policies to support the growth and development of the city to 2051. This chapter also sets out the overall citywide population and employment for 2051 and increases the population forecast to 208,000 over the 203,000 set out in A Place to Grow. This is an increase of 5,000 people from that which was required in A Place to Grow, and that is intended to accommodate population growth within the annexed Dolime Quarry lands. To conform with A Place to Grow, targets for the urban structure are required. The intensification target is proposed to be updated and set at 46% of new residential units to be constructed per year in the built-up area. While this is an increase from 40% in the current official plan, this does represent an alternative target request from the minimum of 50% required by the province. The alternative target is being requested to accommodate growth within the Dolime Quarry Annex lands, which are considered as part of the Greenfield area. The Greenfield density target is also proposed to be 68 residents and jobs per hectare, and this is an increase from 50 residents and jobs per hectare in our current official plan. For the downtown, we are proposing a density target for 2031 to remain at 150 residents and jobs per hectare, and setting targets of 175 residents and jobs per hectare by 2041 and 200 residents and jobs per hectare by 2051. This slide displays the proposed urban structure as set out in OPA 80. Following consultation on growth scenarios, the urban structure was refined, and as displayed on this slide, the proposed strategic growth area for Clare Road East has been removed. This next part of the presentation will focus on the proposed land uses within the Rolling Hills area. This slide displays Schedule 2 of the official plan with proposed modifications to implement the city's growth management strategy. Generally, the following proposed land use changes in OPA 80 are applicable to the Rolling Hills area. For the low density Greenfield residential designation, we are proposing to combine it with the low density residential designation and propose some amendments to height and densities, which I'll explain further. We are proposing a new Rolling Hills estate residential designation, and we are proposing refinements to the significant natural areas and natural areas designations within Rolling Hills. This slide displays the existing official plan land use designations for Rolling Hills on the left side of the screen, and the proposed land use designations on the right side of the screen. Over the next few slides, I will discuss each of these land use designations. In the existing official plan, the Rolling Hills area outside of the natural heritage system is designated reserve lands. This designation applies to these lands where there is no municipal servicing available. In terms of permitted uses, existing legal uses of land may continue. And the official plan states that the redesignation of reserve lands to other land use designations would be considered through a secondary plan. The Rolling Hills area had been included in the Claremont secondary plan, and it was proposed through that process that they would be modified. City Council directed that the Rolling Hills area be removed from consideration through the secondary plan process for Claremont, and that the area would be considered through the next municipal comprehensive review, now known as Shaping Guelph. On this slide, you'll see in the land use designation map on the right side, the medium density residential designation is shown in yellow along Clare Road East. This designation permits multiple unit residential buildings such as townhouses and apartments at a maximum height of 6 stories and a maximum net density of 100 units per hectare. The proposed mixed office designation is shown in orange on this slide. It's a small property fronting onto Clare Road East. This designation permits commercial, retail, office, personal service uses, and residential uses, including detached, semi-detached townhouse and apartments. The maximum height is 4 stories, and the maximum net density is 100 units per hectare. Low density residential designation, as shown in white on this slide, permits detached, semi-detached townhouse and apartments at a maximum height of 3 stories and a maximum net density of 35 units per hectare. And that's what the existing official plan permits. In terms of proposed changes, with the combination of the low density residential land use categories, we are looking at permitting a maximum net density within the delineated built-up area along arterial roads at 60 units per hectare, and that is the only change proposed. OPA 80 proposes to introduce a new land use designation called Rolling Hills Estate Residential. This designation is shown in hatched gray on the slide. The proposed designation applies to lands that are serviced by private individual on-site water and wastewater services, and where the extension of municipal services is not anticipated to occur due to constraints of the natural heritage system. In terms of permitted uses, existing detached dwellings are permitted, and we propose to permit additional residential dwelling units, also known as secondary suites or basement apartments, on existing lots of record. I'll now turn to the natural heritage system and provide some information about the land use designations within the Rolling Hills area and the refinements to the system proposed through OPA 80. Within the natural heritage system, there are 2 primary land use designations. The first is significant natural areas and natural areas, as shown in green. And the second is the natural areas overlay, which you'll see in the green hatching. Within the areas designated significant natural areas and natural areas, development and site alteration is not permitted. Legally existing uses, buildings and structures are permitted, as are passive recreational activities, low impact scientific and educational activities, and then things such as forest management, habitat conservation, restoration activities. But no development is permitted in these areas. Within the Rolling Hills area, we also have the natural area overlay. And in those areas, development and site alteration is not permitted until an environmental impact study or environmental assessment is completed and determines which natural heritage system policies apply to those lands. This will be completed through development applications if they are proposed. When the Rolling Hills area was included within the Claremont secondary plan, studies were completed as part of the comprehensive environmental impact study to determine refinements to the natural heritage system. Within Rolling Hills, refinements were made by updating the ecological land classification mapping. The mapping was updated based on aerial photography, site-specific environmental impact studies that have been completed, Ministry and GRCA wetland mapping, and through field verifications from the road or on sites where access was permitted. The updated ELC mapping and criteria of the official plan were used to refine the natural heritage system. In response to comments and questions that were received about the proposed refinements in OPA 80, staff are currently conducting a review where further NHS refinements are being considered based on recent findings of site visits. This current review is limited to woodlands and wetlands, and it is not considering any refinements to the significant landform. As I mentioned earlier, if any development is proposed in these areas, site-specific environmental impact studies would be required to determine the full extent of the natural heritage system. So while Shaping Guelph and Official Plan Amendment 80 are focused on official plan policies and land use designations, it is also important to understand zoning regulations which apply to the properties. The official plan sets out the city's general policies for future land use, where the zoning bylaw puts the plan into effect and provides for its day-to-day administration. It contains specific requirements that are legally enforceable, which means that construction or new development that doesn't comply with the zoning bylaw is not allowed, and the municipality could refuse to issue building permits. So what is a zoning bylaw? The zoning bylaw sets out the rules for how land can be used, where building structures and parking can be located, and the size of building structures and lots. The zoning bylaw divides the city into different land use zones with detailed mapping, and the bylaw specifies the permitted uses and the required standards for each zone. We are currently working on a comprehensive zoning bylaw review, which will be a new zoning bylaw for the city of Guelph. As part of that review, the Rolling Hills area is proposed to be zoned urban reserve because the Rolling Hills area does not have municipal servicing. Permitted uses within this zone are legally existing uses, buildings, and structures. Should development or change be proposed, a zoning bylaw amendment application would be required. Also, full municipal services would be required. The zoning bylaw amendment application process is a full public process under the Planning Act and would require a public meeting of City Council. And while we're addressing regulations this evening as well, I'd also like to mention the city's tree bylaw. At this time of year, many city property owners are considering outside projects which may impact trees. The city's tree bylaw applies to all properties within the Rolling Hills area and applies to all trees 10 centimeters in diameter at breast height or larger. And if you're considering a project on your property that may impact trees, please contact the city's planning services to apply for a permit. So thank you so much for your attention through the presentation, and we are now moving into our discussion section, and I'll turn it back over to Susan.
Great, thanks Melissa for the presentation. So Melissa's covered a number of elements in the presentation this evening, looking at densities, looking at natural areas, natural heritage, the zoning bylaw, and then the last piece on the tree bylaw. So we're welcoming questions or comments. If you'd like to put something in the chat, by all means, you can add to the chat. I just ask that the questions and comments are respectful for everyone. And if you'd like to raise your hand to ask a question, there's a little hand symbol at the top, and you can just select that and we will unmute you and be able to hear your question. So my colleague James is going to be watching the chat as well. So if people feel more comfortable to put questions in there, you're welcome to, or raise your hand. And I see Zoe, you have your hand raised. Just make sure. Okay, Zoe, you should be able to unmute and ask your question.
Hi, this is Nick. It's actually not Zoe.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Hi, Nick.
Yeah. Hi. I was just wondering, like on the mapping here, was there no change to the residential, the estate residential that you guys were suggesting to keep?
What we're displaying for you tonight is OPA 80 as it was released. So we have made no changes since it was presented to council.
Okay, so I thought today's meeting was to go over any changes or stuff that was brought forward to you guys for the NHS studies that were done.
No, not this evening. Tonight is to present OPA 80, and any revisions to OPA 80 would be presented to council.
Oh, okay, so that's not in the public meeting?
Not this evening, no.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Nick. I see Ed, you have your hand up, so I'll just ask you to unmute. Oh, and turn your video on. Hi, Ed. Can you unmute? Should be able to. It says your mic is available. Jason or James, any thoughts so we can help Ed?
Ed, you should be able to see a microphone button at the top right of your screen. It might have a slash through it now. If you click on that, it should unmute you.
And it may also be at the bottom of the screen if you're viewing it through the web only. There should be a set of icons on the bottom if you're viewing it through the web.
Maybe take a chat question and then come back to them when their tech issues are fixed.
Okay, James.
Sure. So we have someone who wants us to maybe put this in plain language for a bit. They say they're not a land use planner. This individual has a home on Serena Lane. What does this mean for them?
In terms of land use designations, what we're proposing through this official plan amendment is to recognize the existing land uses within a land use category that is appropriate. So that's the low density residential and the Rolling Hills Estate residential. So within both of those designations, low density or single detached houses are permitted. And then we are looking at some changes to the permissions along the frontage of Clare Road East to allow for some redevelopment to occur. But if you are on Serena Lane, it doesn't mean much for your property. If you were proposing to change your property, you would have to connect to municipal services and apply for a zoning amendment. So it's really, the intent is to recognize existing land use within the area and then to allow for some change. But as you'll notice from when I showed Schedule 2, the majority of the city is designated within low density residential, and it does recognize where detached housing, semi-detached housing is permitted.
Okay, great. Thanks, Melissa. We'll do one more from the chat and then we'll see if we can get Ed unmuted and asking question. I see a couple other hands up too, so we'll get to you as well. James?
Yeah, we have someone who's asking if we could please clarify what is meant by urban reserve for rolling hills.
Yeah, so the urban reserve is a proposed zoning category in our zoning bylaw, and the urban reserve zone would not permit any changes to your properties because you're not connected to municipal services. The name in and of itself, I wouldn't take too much meaning of that. It's a legacy name that we have in our zoning bylaw, and it's really just for those areas that are not serviced, and in some cases, lands that are being have other development constraints to them. They may be held out for expansion of the Hanlon Parkway along the edges of the Hanlon, but in your area, it specifically means that there are no services available, so you would not be able to expand or have different uses on your properties.
Okay. Thanks, Melissa. Ed, I can see you're getting yours into the chat, so we'll go to those. And I'm sorry your mic isn't working. So, but you've got them in the chat. So we'll go to yours. So there was a couple of questions from Ed. Why has there's certain addresses? So why has 9 Serena, 2 Carlisle, 2 Kilkenny, and 50% of 5 Kilkenny? These aren't shown to be forested, and why is that?
So Leah, I'm not sure if you wanted to come in here. That is part of our refinements to the natural heritage system. I'm not sure that we can specifically answer individual properties. Leah, we can help.
Yeah, just to add on that, areas that have existing development, for example, your driveway space or your house, areas like that or your front yard are typically cut out of the natural heritage system to recognize that there is that existing use. And like Melissa said, we're continuing to take a closer look at the extent of natural heritage system, including significant woodlands in rolling hills. So what Melissa proposed tonight or shared tonight is what was previously shared with council, and we're continuing to work through refinements on that.
Okay, thanks, Leah. Ed had a second part, and then I'm going to go to a couple of folks with their hands up. So the second part of Ed's question was, why are all the lots on Carlisle and half of the lots on Serena East Side are not designated Rolling Hills Estate? Also, all of Kilkenny. Why is that?
So in proposed OPA 80, we did look at properties where there were significant constraints to potentially future redevelopment or potentially future extension of municipal services. So where the natural heritage system restricts potential future development, the Rolling Hills Estate residential designation is proposed. Where the natural heritage system does not provide those restrictions to the extension of services, we have proposed low density residential.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. Jason Martin, I'm coming to you. So you should be able to hopefully unmute.
Yeah, I just unmuted. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can. Hi.
Perfect. I have a couple questions. A few times throughout these meetings, a few of my fellow neighbors have brought up this point of have we looked into the amount of people that, or the type of people we want to attract to our city who want estate lots that are 4-acre lots or at least 1-acre lots. You take 1% of the population of Guelph. If Guelph's 150,000 people, it doesn't take, we're 1,000 people plus that who potentially want some high-end lots available where they'd want to set up shop, want to attract those people to open businesses, employ Guelph residents. Has anyone really looked into those numbers? How many estate homes, how many places like Rolling Hills and the uniqueness of it, where we want to attract people who are worth a lot of money that would potentially set up shop in Guelph? Has anyone done any kind of studying on that? Looked at what we have available. There's Fox Run, there's Rolling Hills. There's not much besides that. I mean, I'm pulling a number of 1% as in something, I don't know if that's realistic, but do we have 1,000 residents available for people like that potentially? And do we have a glut of these types of residents and lots available to attract more people? And are we making a big mistake if we're trying to take some of these away from the few that we just have?
Okay, we'll start there, Jason. So just a question about whether we've looked at who we're trying to attract to Guelph and what the availability is of estate residential.
So yes, we've looked at in our growth management strategy, we've looked at the type of housing and provided a market lens to that. And when we look at that, we consider housing forms as opposed to the size of lots. And we do look at the land area that is available within the city's boundaries and the population that we are forecasted to grow to and how we could accommodate that. If people are searching a rural estate lifestyle, I would suggest that it wouldn't be found within the bounds of an urban municipality and that those lifestyles will move further out into the rural areas.
Okay.
So Jason,
sorry.
another quick question, if you could. I just want to make sure we have time for everybody.
Sure. I just want to follow up on that, and I appreciate your answer on that. So I can tell you, I did exactly what you just said. I originally built a house on Concession 11 in Puss Lynch. I built again on Hume Road. With all the kids we have, I found it. I moved into Rolling Hills on purpose. It's a stone's throw from the city with the 4-acre estate lot, and that's what I wanted. And that's the exact reason I moved back into here, because it is unique. It is basically in the heart of the city now. We're getting close to the city. And I think these particular lots would be extremely popular and attractive to the type of people we want to attract to the city. And there's no other lots like it. Like the 50 lots in Rolling Hills, it's not many. I don't know if there's 50 families or 50 people or 150 people. That's a very small amount percentage wise. You're talking a fraction of 1% of the very wealthy that could potentially want something like this. And that's the kind of people we should want to attract. Okay. They want to open a company that could employ 1,000 people. Like, I don't know if we really looked at that. So.
Okay. Well, thanks, Jason, for that perspective and thinking about the community as tied to investment in the city as a whole. I'm going to keep going. That's okay. And James will go to the chat and then we'll come back to folks with their hand up next.
Sure. Thank you.
Sure. We had a couple that were related to infrastructure, so I'll pose them at the same time. Is there a plan to put a road through Carlisle from Maltby to Clare? And do you intend to put services on Maltby to Clare through Carlisle?
So just for clarification for everyone, the city is not proposing to extend any municipal services. If municipal services were to be extended to service any of the properties within Rolling Hills, it is the responsibility of the property owners and not the city of Guelph. The Claremont secondary plan, when it was released as draft for its public meeting, did show a road connection from Claremont, a potential road connection into the Rolling Hills area. So that is a consideration of the Claremont secondary plan, and that is going to council on May 16th. The materials will be released this Friday, so you can review the policies in there. But again, the city does not extend any roads. That's done through property owners and development.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. I'm going to come to Mary, who had her hand up. So questions about what's been presented so far, Mary Mathers. You should be able to unmute and ask yours.
Hi there. Yes, I live at 5 Carlisle Place. Thank you for taking the opportunity to allow me to speak here. The actions of City Council to designate some properties zoned for redevelopment sometime beyond 2051 creates an imbalance in value with properties within a few hundred yards away in the same area which have been designated as estate. This nonsensical timeline of at least a minimum of 30 years and quite possibly longer negatively impacts the values of those houses designated for redevelopment and undermines true price discovery and fair market valuation mechanisms. Buyers looking for estates will not be interested in this timeline, and neither will buyers interested in development. So this puts all of these houses on an unfair footing regarding market valuation. In my opinion, this decision verges on reckless discrimination against some homeowners in favor of others in the same neighborhood. We feel that not only is this unfair treatment of a group of citizens, but it is amoral. We urge City Council to reevaluate the area that they have designated for redevelopment in Rolling Hills sometime post 2051 and let it remain as estate homes. If the city and province actually do need this land for redevelopment sometime after 2051, those decisions should be made in that appropriate time frame, closer to that date, in advance of reasonable actions from developers. That would be fair treatment of the citizens of this city. I would like you to explain this inequality because I cannot see any logic in this decision.
Okay, thanks, Mary, for sharing your perspectives, and sounds like you've been thinking about it a lot, so I appreciate that. Melissa, is there any comment sort of on the decision of the estate versus non? And I see comments coming in of others who feel the same way Mary has. So we've got that down for sure as input, Mary, but I'll just turn to Melissa if there's any comment from the city side.
Sure. I would like to say that the low density residential designation does not imply development. As I mentioned, it is applied to the majority of lands within the city of Guelph, and we do not expect every neighborhood to be redeveloped that is designated as low density residential. It is a designation that recognizes where single detached and semi-detached houses are and exist within the city of Guelph. And as I mentioned earlier, the distinction we made between where low density is applied and where the estate is applied is based on where the natural heritage system would restrict the extension of municipal services. That was the main reason why we brought in the Rolling Hills Estate Residential, is that those areas are constrained by the natural heritage system, and the extension of linear services would be difficult to achieve with our natural heritage system policies that protect those features.
I simply just don't understand, though. This is decades from now, and what you've done is you have arbitrarily determined that some group within this area is going to be unfavorably treated by market dynamics. Why not just let the market, take care of this? If this needs to be redeveloped 4 decades from now, let those decisions come then. But what you've done is you've created a total imbalance, and it's arbitrary.
Okay, Mary, I think we've got that in for input now, and Melissa has responded, so I'm going to keep going, and I can see there's lots more in the chat, so I'm going to keep going. Thanks, Mary, for sharing your perspectives. James, I'm going to ask you to cover a couple more from the chat, please, and then I have a couple more with hands up too.
Okay, next one. Melissa stated at the outset that the province has set a deadline of July 1st to submit plans to the province, but our understanding is that council will not deal with the plan until July 11th. How can council consider any changes at the approval meeting without falling afoul of the provincial deadline, and are there consequences of missing the July 1st deadline?
Generally, there are no consequences of not meeting the provincial deadline. We've been in constant contact with ministry staff about our project and our proposed timelines. And yes, the our council decision date is 10 days after the provincial deadline, but we've been assured that there are no concerns from ministry staff on our timelines.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. James, one more from the chat, and then we'll go to hands.
Yeah, we had one. It came up a couple of times. Requests for a later date, depending what's available. But someone has asked if you could please provide a planning map that shows lots and house numbers on Serena, Carlaw, Kilkenny, and Megan Place. So a request for consideration that's come through a couple times.
Yes, we can consider that, and we can post that to Have Your Say when we post the presentation from this evening.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. I have Ben next. So Ben, I'll ask you to unmute and just if we can keep our comments short, that would be great. We've got a few more. I could see quite a few in the chat, so I just want to make sure we've got time for everybody. Ben, can you go ahead?
No problem. Just a couple quick questions. So Nick's early question kind of sparked my interest. So it sounds to me like there obviously has been some talk already about amending the NHS. Is that correct? I guess when the map came out, it probably stirred the pot a little bit. I'm just wondering, you know, who's included in those talks, and yeah, can you speak about that?
Okay, great. Leah, I'm assuming that's you.
Yeah, sure. So city staff were contacted by a number of landowners, and were made aware that some landowners had reached out to an ecological consultant to review their properties and review the limits of the natural heritage system on their properties. And so what the city has done in response to that is we've agreed to review the refinements that their ecological consultant has proposed. And then also taking a closer look at other properties within the Rolling Hills neighborhood to assess tree cover, things related to significant woodlands and wetlands. And so that's the information from the memos prepared by the ecological consultants, as well as the additional consideration by city staff and the consultant retained by the city to review those memos will feed into further refinements to the natural heritage system.
Okay. Okay, so at any time, I guess, any landowner can contact you guys and attempt whatever to get some more information on that, I assume. One other question I had was, all right, so like, why were planners so quick to voluntarily increase the city's population target when the Dolan quarry lands were acquired? Because it feels like to a lot of Rolling Hills residents that the planners did that so that you could keep coming after Rolling Hills. So I'm just wondering why that was done. And then there was also, it seemed to be done before there was any work done on the water and other environmental factors, et cetera, that you were quick to jump on that so that you could keep trying to push for this redevelopment of Rolling Hills.
Okay, so I'll ask Melissa to speak to sort of the timing with the population and the Doline.
Yeah, so the Dolime area was annexed into the city, and through a minister's zoning order has been zoned for residential uses. And through our growth management strategy, we needed to accommodate the minister's approval of those lands. And the other side of that is that there are, outside of the medium density residential along Clare Road, there is no projected population increase within the Rolling Hills area to contribute to our population increase. So the Dolime Quarry and Rolling Hills are not related to each other. The increase of the population, if we did not increase the population to accommodate Dolime, it would not have changed the recommendations for land use designations within Rolling Hills.
Doesn't really make much sense to me, but it seems to me that like, you have these extra, hectares of land that, suddenly came on the map, and you weren't, I mean, you immediately increased our, the population target of the city, like to go above what the province was already asking. It didn't seem to make sense to me. Anyways. Okay, I guess I'm done.
Okay, thanks, Ben. James, I'll ask if there are others in the chat, and then I know Christine, you had asked, and Zoe, you had your hand up before. Oh, Zoe's Nick. Nick, you had your hand up before as well, but it's down now, so I'm not sure if you changed your mind, but we'll do a chat one, and then Christine, and then Nick, if you were still interested.
Yeah, the next one in my queue, it looked like someone had a point of clarification. So the individual had stated, I noticed that there is medium density on the north side of Clare Road in some sections. The only existing medium density is at the corner of Victoria and Clare, is it not? But I think they're looking for some clarification there.
Sorry, on the north side?
Yeah, it said, I noticed that there is medium density on the north side of Clare Road in some sections. The only existing medium density is at the corner of Victoria and Clare, is it not? That's what they put in the chat.
Okay. We haven't proposed any changes to land use designations on the north side of Clare Road. This is all I can offer there.
Okay, I'll invite the person if there's something we've missed in that question, if they could clarify that in the chat, that'd be helpful. I have one more. I wanted to know if the plan is still to divide the Megan Street properties for half to remain estate residential.
Tonight, again, we're just presenting what was proposed through OPA 80, and we haven't made any recommendations for any changes to those land use designations. Following this evening's open house, we'll be reviewing all of the comments that we've received and looking at if there are any revisions that need to be made to the land use designations. So no, we don't have anything proposed to change from OPA 80 as of yet.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. I think next was Christine. Let me see if we can get you. Or Christina, sorry. Christina, can you unmute for your question?
Can you hear me?
I can. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so my question was about the process between now and July 11th. And so as I understand through Ben's question about natural heritage, and I'm sure through the comments of this meeting and others, there will be an evolution of what eventually gets to council on July 11th. I guess my concern from the families for Rolling Hills is really how do we engage more in the process versus just kind of being able to be expected to accept what comes through 10 days before that meeting. Like, how do we have more open dialogue about alternatives to what isn't being presented in OPA 80 right now?
Okay, thanks, Christina. Melissa?
So as I was mentioning, our next step is to review all of the comments received. And if we needed clarification of anyone's comments, we would reach out to those people to get that clarification. And then we would be proposing our recommendations to council.
But as I'm assuming that there will be revisions, there will be multiple revisions to that before now, and call it July 1st when it first goes out publicly. How do we become more involved in that process and be more aware of some of the revisions that are being proposed? Rather than, I think you can understand that as residents with, you know, quite the stake in this, we'd like to be more informed and more part of the revisions than just receiving them right before the council meeting.
Well, the process is that we release our draft official plan amendment, which we have, and we held the open house in our statutory public meeting of council, and we had an open survey on Have Your Say. We've been accepting comments for the past 3 months on OPA 80 since it was released in February, and we're having this open house this evening. So our next step is to review comments and provide our recommendation to council. There will not be another release of a draft prior to the council meeting. So your next opportunity would be to present anything on our revisions or recommendations to council. You can delegate to council.
Okay, so let me ask the question a little bit differently. With the proposed population slated sort of to go into Rolling Hills now, it's a fairly small piece of what the city is trying to accomplish overall in the plan. What other alternatives have planners considered versus Rolling Hills?
So again,
for some reason, council said, you know what, there's a lot of value in having a neighborhood like this within the city limits. We don't want to touch it. What alternatives have staff looked at?
So the only proposed area where we are looking at population change within Rolling Hills is within the medium density residential designation along Clare Road, where municipal services could be extended. We have not attributed any new population to the low density residential within the majority of Rolling Hills within the plan horizon. What we've done is placed an appropriate land use category on single detached dwellings, which in our official plan is low density residential. So your existing housing matches low density residential. Low density residential is the appropriate designation for single detached housing in the city of Guelph. And as I mentioned, it covers the majority of detached neighborhoods within the city.
And so if we consider that top strip along Clare as part of our community, again, what alternatives would there be to including that?
To removing the medium density residential. At this time,
Correct. So what alternatives would there be? I understand it's your proposal. I'm just suggesting that at council, if somebody were to say, hey, there's a lot of value to keeping this community intact in its entirety, what would the alternatives be?
Well, we've presented our recommendation that sets out with Clare Road being an arterial and our objectives of increasing transit ridership and creating more complete communities, that the medium density designation is appropriate along Clare Road East. We are accepting comments and we will respond to those comments in our recommendation report to council.
So are you saying there's no alternative, or are you saying you don't want to speak about the alternative?
We provided our recommended growth strategy to council, and now we are proposing recommended land use designations to go along with the recommended growth strategy. We will be responding to comments and reviewing those comments to determine if there's any changes that are required to official plan amendment 80. So yes, we would be reviewing and responding to any comments.
I understand you don't want to answer the question, so that's okay. Yeah. So
we provided our growth scenarios. Christina, we provided 3 growth scenarios and our options in 2021, and we had those consultations. We are not exploring further growth options for the city at this time.
Okay, Christina, I'm going to keep moving if that's okay. Thank you for the questions. And I see that there's lots still in the chat, so I'm going to ask James to kind of go to there, and then we'll continue to get some of the hands that are up and trying to address as many of the questions and comments that we've got here. James?
Yeah, we had an individual with 2 questions. I'll go to their first question first. Given the natural heritage system is indicated between Carlaw and Kilkenny, how can the city plan to destroy it and run services down Carlaw?
So as I mentioned previously, the city is not proposing to extend municipal services. The extension of municipal services would be completed by property owners. So if that was individual property owners' desire to seek out the extension of services to their property, they would have to follow the requirements to have that completed. But the city does not extend services.
Okay, and their second question was, why doesn't the city develop Victoria Road to manage traffic and services? Presently, as an artery, it is gridlock every day at Clare and Victoria.
So there are proposed changes to the road network within the transportation master plan. And I can't speak to what those are at this time, but if you would like, you can send in an email to us and we can get a response for you.
Okay. So a few things for follow-up on that. And Kelly, I saw your hand up. I know you were asking about maps as well, but I've got you, so you should be able to unmute and ask your question.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Yes, I was appointed as one of the members for Rolling Hills as the community working group member. And I will say, I resonate with a lot of the people that are listening tonight. It sort of feels at this point that our voices are unheard. But I'm going to ask that question again. Like, you're asking for our feedback right now without a map that clearly shows which property is where. So when I look at the map right now, I don't know where my house is on that map. So to ask for my feedback is really contrary to this whole process. So I'm asking that we have another meeting. We need to have a map that shows where our houses are so we can give you appropriate feedback. I don't feel we can do that with what's been given to us.
Okay, Kelly, thank you for that. Melissa, thoughts on a map with areas? I know it was raised earlier, and an opportunity to sort of orient people to where these elements are within the neighborhood.
Yes, we will post a map with property lines on it on the Have Your Say page, along with a presentation from this evening.
That's great. When can we expect that?
Later this week.
And then will we have an opportunity to meet again to give our feedback based on what that map looks like?
We won't have time to schedule another meeting before the council meeting, but I think you could provide your comments to us through email at plan2051@guelph.ca.
I see. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. James, returning to chat questions. I don't see other hands up.
Yeah, I think we may have got our clarification on the Clare Road question. So the person says, on the north side of Clare Road East, there are townhomes, a religious establishment, mixed office, and the apartment building on the corner. Are the townhomes considered medium density? It would appear on the map that they are.
Yes, that is correct. The townhomes are medium density residential.
Okay. James, others?
Yeah, we had someone wondering about if there are other similar neighborhoods or proposals as part of OPA 80 throughout the city of Guelph where similar changes are being proposed or implemented.
So yes, if you're referring to the designation change to medium density residential, which would permit increased densities in different housing forms, yes, absolutely. Within our strategic growth areas, within our downtown, along arterials and collectors, it is proposed. The Gordon Street corridor is a really good example. So through our last official plan amendment, growth plan conformity exercise in 2012, large portions of Gordon Street were converted from low density residential to medium and high density residential. A really good example of that is the area between Valley and Lansdowne, where there are existing bungalows that are proposed to be medium density residential. You'll also see areas that are redeveloping at Gordon and Lowe's, and then in along Aramasa, we're proposing some changes, Silver Creek Parkway. Yes, so other areas, but the low density residential designation, again, is not proposing changes or intensification for the Rolling Hills area in particular.
Okay, I hope that helps for folks. So there's some other areas that are looking at these same medium and density residential. Nick, I can see you have your hand up again, so that's great. If you want to unmute.
Hi. Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to touch base on what the lady earlier mentioned about the value of the properties. And I mean, ideally we moved to this area for that specific reason, to get an estate lot and get away from all the construction. And then to find out that, hey, there's going to be construction coming back here, but yet they kind of want to draw a line in the sand and exclude 3 of the 8 properties on Megan Place. I mean, that's pretty disheartening and confusing to me how we'd be stuck on both spectrums, because now we couldn't sell it as an estate lot and it's not zoned as a residential area. So what do I do with my multi-million-dollar property that we just bought? So ideally, we're not for the zoning, but if it goes through, I mean, the only fair, rational thing to do would be include the whole area or exclude all of it. Like that, it just, me being the homeowner, I understand you guys are making decisions on your end, but if you put yourself in my position, what do you do then when you're surrounded by townhomes and detached homes and I'm considered a estate lot? Who's gonna, first of all, who's gonna buy my lot? And second of all, I can't even sell it to a developer because it's an estate residential. So it's very confusing how those decisions are made, and geographically we're all in the same area. So again, I'd rather it doesn't get zoned, but if it does, it should all get zoned, right?
Okay, thanks, Nick. Melissa, thoughts?
I think we can just take that as a comment.
Okay,
Oh,
great.
Okay.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, something to think about for sure about you know, all or none and where the line is, and we certainly heard that from somebody else also with the value and market valuation piece. So appreciate that. I have Jason Martin next with your hand up. So Jason, if you want to unmute.
Yeah, I just unmuted. Is that good? Can you hear me again?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I know I talked to Cam about this over a year ago, and I didn't really get a clear answer. I don't recall what he said. This thing with the population growth that we have to meet these numbers, and if we don't, it's like a disaster if we don't. What's the answer on that if we don't meet the population growth numbers? And I'll just make this a second part. And do most of the people of Guelph know that we're trying to cram another 15 or 20,000 people into a city that most people will say is jammed already? I mean, we've turned our four lane roads into 2 lane roads all across the city for the bike lanes, which is a separate conversation. to get from the YMCA to like the Guelph Lake sports fields at a busy time of day takes you a half an hour. You know, you compare our roads to Kitchener, you can get from North Waterloo to the bottom part of Kitchener like in 12 minutes. You know, in Guelph's 150,000 people, those two cities are like 400,000. It just, I just can't believe that if the people of Guelph knew what we're trying to do, that 51% of the people would want that. I would think like 1% would, and 99 would not. Have we thought of that to make the people of Guelph really aware of what's going on, and what happens if we don't meet those growth targets?
Okay. So
Okay.
just a question about the growth sort of projection overall, and then consequences of not meeting.
So the growth projection overall, if the city of Guelph were to propose a plan that did not meet the population and employment forecast, the minister is our approval authority, and they would modify our plan in such a way to meet those targets. So again, our council adopts our plan and the minister is the approval authority. In terms of making people aware, we have done over 2 years of engagement on our Shaping Guelph growth management strategy, including in-person events prior to COVID. And the Transportation Master Plan also spent 2 years consulting with the community on the transportation plan that council approved. So there has been a significant amount of outreach to involve the community and help them be informed about the discussions and the decisions that need to be made.
Okay, if I can just have a quick follow-up. I'm going to venture to guess 80% of the people of Guelph have no clue, have no clue of this. They get a letter in the mail, it gets chucked or it gets burned, and they could care less. So I'm just speaking frank here, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. So on that, of the people of Guelph being aware, I bet you most have no clue. But I do guarantee you this: most people of Guelph think it's a disaster to try to get around the city. I can guarantee you that. And the part on the cost, what's the number? And I know you don't know it off the top of your head, but if you could find out, if we don't meet the population growth, what kind of grants and stuff are we not going to get? And how? I mean, it comes down to this: we're trying to grant thousands of people, new homes, lots of high density and all this stuff. What if we don't do it? That's the question. What do we lose out on? What's the downside if we don't? I guess, and I know you're not going to have the answer now, but if you could find that out and give us a hard number, we're going to lose out on $20 million a year. We're going to lose out on this. We're going to lose out. If we can get the facts on that or the actual numbers, I think that'd be really helpful.
Okay, Jason. Thanks for that. Melissa, I'm sure that's not something off the top of your head of sort of the cost consequences. Is that something that the city can take back and see if there's an answer to?
I would offer at this time that there is no response to that. There is no program with a place to grow for funding to municipalities for achieving or adhering to a place to grow. There is no funding program with it. But our consequence of adopting a plan that doesn't conform is that the minister will modify our plan to conform.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Jason, I'd like to keep going. I've got Kelly's got her hand up again, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Okay, Kelly.
Hi, thank you. Just one other question. I'm wondering if you might be able to expand a little bit. My understanding is to move from a low density zoning to medium density is quite a simple process. And I think that's sort of a looming question for the residents of Rolling Hills. Like you're saying, well, you know, the rest of Guelph is low density, but my understanding is that it's not that difficult of a process to do that. Can somebody speak to that, please?
Okay, so being able to switch from medium to low, is that what you're asking, Kelly?
Low to medium. So
low to medium.
You're suggesting that, you know, if the residents of Rolling Hills are going to be subdivided between estate residential and low density, the next, domino effect that I think the worry is, low density can be applied to be medium density from a zoning capacity. And my understanding to go from low to medium is really not that difficult of an application process. Could somebody speak to that, please?
Okay, thanks for clarifying. Melissa?
So I'm not sure where your understanding is coming from, but it would be, we're speaking about an official plan amendment that would be required, not a zoning amendment. So it is an official plan land use designation, and that would require an application to amend the official plan, and that has a number of requirements, complete application requirements, considerations, policy conformity. It requires a public meeting of council and a decision of council. So it is a full public process, and it does have a number of requirements to it. And again,
Okay.
I wouldn't say that it's an easy process, and I wouldn't say that every application for that is supportable.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. We have Dr. Lamont. I'll just ask you to unmute and ask your question.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, hi.
Hi. So I'm just wondering, and this is probably a rhetorical question, but why do we have and keep having these meetings and this feedback that you want to get from us, and yet nothing changes the way we want it to change? You have probably 70% of people in Rolling Hills that do not want to change the way it's conformed right now. And yet the other 30%, or whatever that number may be, along Clare Road, totally understand why they want to do it, because, Clare Road's become really, really busy. But what do we as homeowners need to do to affect change to this plan? Because I've attended pretty much all the meetings. We've said the same thing over and over and over again, and yet it keeps chugging along exactly the same. That strip of Clare Road is going to be developed, and it's going to screw up the entire neighborhood. Why would you want to do that? Why?
Okay, so we've got quite a bit of feedback tonight on that sort of split. And I'll just ask Melissa maybe to comment on the feedback from these meetings and how it's integrating into the process.
Yes, so I did try to demonstrate through our presentation the background and what we've gone through the Shaping Guelph process, from what we proposed in the growth scenarios in 2021. And the discussions that we had with Rolling Hills, and how those proposed growth scenarios have changed into the recommendations for Shaping Guelph's growth management strategy and into our official plan policies. So what you may not be seeing is that since we released the policies and had our discussions with council on the growth management strategy in January, no changes have occurred since then, because we're in a consultation period. So in our growth scenarios, we were proposing a low density residential that permitted up to 60 units per hectare, along with the low density residential that permitted up to 35 units per hectare, along with medium density residential. We proposed a strategic growth area, and we removed that consideration following consultation with the community. So there is no strategic growth area proposed here. We removed the low density Greenfield designation from consideration within Rolling Hills that would permit up to 60 units per hectare as of right. And we introduced a Rolling Hills estate residential. We did hear quite strongly that some neighborhoods would like an estate residential designation created. So we have looked at that, and we are in a consultation period. So the growth management strategy, as it really was released in January, set out our recommendations for the official plan. A month after that, we released the official plan policies, and we've been in consultation since then. So you may not be seeing that we have made changes based on your comments that we've been receiving over the past few months, and that's because we're still in a consultation period.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. James, were there others in the chat? Is there anything
We
we
had
cover off?
yeah, we had a request to reread the previous question I had asked for about substantial changes being implemented elsewhere in the city. So I'll read the question in full per the request. Are the city's changes to the official plan in OPA 80 carving up any other developed community in Guelph and splitting it up lot by lot as is being proposed here? Please clarify where such substantial changes are being implemented, as I would like to understand the logic of creating such a disparate impact to families in the neighborhood.
So I guess, Melissa, the question is, I know you spoke to where other areas have medium density. Is the Rolling Hills sort of split unique? I think is the underlying question, or are there other areas that are similar in the city?
Yeah, other than the examples that I provided, and I would say again that the low density residential designation does apply to the majority of lands within the city of Guelph, and change is not proposed in the majority of neighborhoods in Guelph, as change is not proposed within the majority of Rolling Hills. And you will see when you look at Schedule 2, the land use schedule in our official plan, that medium density and high density residential categories, along with commercial categories and mixed office commercial, are along our arterials and collectors. So it's pretty much common throughout the city that you would see different land use designations along arterial roads as opposed to low density residential. And again, we're not proposing change through the majority of Rolling Hills.
Okay, thanks, Melissa and city team. I don't see other hands up. We're just at 5 to 8. I think we've heard quite a bit about the importance of sort of the value, the market valuation, the distinction between estate residential and others, and some feedback tonight about whether it's all or none or how to address that imbalance. Certainly a request from folks for a map, which the city's team has committed to sharing, as well as the presentation. Melissa, if you wouldn't mind just kind of going over next steps of where things go from here, that would be great.
Sure. So our next steps after tonight's meeting, we will be reviewing all of the comments that we have received since the release of OPA 80. And proposing any revisions to OPA 80 based on the comments that we've received, and providing our recommendations to council. Currently, we're scheduled for council in July. Following council's decision on our recommendations, we will be submitting official plan amendment 80 to the province for approval. And all of the comments that we do receive, we will be reviewing. And if you have any further comments following tonight, you can submit them to us through plan2051@guelph.ca, and have a look at the Have Your Say page for Shaping Guelph for the presentation from this evening to be uploaded, and we will include the map with property boundaries on it. And thank you so much for your time this evening and for all of your comments. And we will be reaching out to individuals who have provided comments where we require further clarification. And we will be working through the refinements of the natural heritage system and reviewing that for updates in our recommendations to council.
Great. Thank you, Melissa. Again, thanks everyone for your participation and questions and comments, both live and through the chat. We'll make sure that we have all of the feedback from the chat will inform our summary from our discussion this evening as well. So I just wanted to say thank you again for spending some time with us. I know you're very passionate about your community, and very happy to have you participate. So thanks and have a good evening.